Recording in progress.
All right, today is December 19th, 2022. This is the Historic Preservation Commission, and we will do a roll call, please.
Chair Haley,
Here.
Commissioner Burke. Here. Commissioner Dunlap,
Here.
Commissioner Keller.
Here.
All right, our agenda for tonight, there's no changes or anything we can move to approve.
No changes. I'll move to approve the agenda for tonight, December 19th, 2022.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And then we have 2 months of minutes to approve, October 17th, and then also November 7th. So we can, unless we have specific things, we can approve both of them, or if we need to go through a certain month, we can do that too.
I would have moved to approve both of those sets of minutes. They looked right.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, any public comments that are not on our agenda for this evening? All right, and then our first, we have a public hearing for 1209 Main Street, and we'll have a staff report.
Thank you, Chair Haley. Good evening, everybody.
Evening.
Okay, so yes, we have a resolution number 7, series 2022, which is a request to landmark the property at 1209 Main Street. And before I go any further, I just want to make sure, can people see this? It's kind of bright against, okay. So just a reminder, you've seen a lot of this information already a couple months ago, but just a reminder of the location of the property. It's a couple miles north of us here, a couple blocks north of us on Main Street. Then these are from the 1948 assessor's photo, so the photograph and the house and the floor plan. And this is the property from this year, obviously earlier in the year, but this is what the property looks like today. And just sort of a list up there of all of the different places that staff looked to kind of research the property and whether it had changed over time. And as you can see, it looks pretty much the same. There was a siding change in the 1970s, but otherwise the floor plan, the ornamentation, the details look largely the same. And then for landmark criteria, so landmarks must be at least 50 years old. They must meet one or more of the criteria for architectural, social, or geographic and environmental significance. And then they should meet one or more criteria for physical integrity. So to take us through those, the structure was constructed around 1909, so making it approximately 113 years old, so that's more than 50. And then in terms of architectural significance, this structure shows the craftsman style bungalow elements which are retained. It is in the Main Street location as well, which kind of goes toward its architectural significance and its location. And then in terms of social significance, this is covered during the demolition review and also at much greater depth in your staff report, but just a reminder that this is associated with the Kalachi family, and that it also has multiple connections to the economic history of the town, so coal mining, bootlegging, restaurant industry, and my favorite, small-scale poultry raising. And then in terms of physical integrity, it is in the original location, as I mentioned. The 1948 size and form are retained, and in fact, it looks like even going back to the 1930s, it's probably pretty similar to then, if not, some form maintained from its original 1909 structure. There has been siding material changed, as I noted before, but no other changes or documentation of any changes was found. So I will summarize the criteria and the recommendations in a moment, but I also just want to pause and acknowledge that this is a little bit of a different process. This structure does not have a finding of probable cause already, and it doesn't have an assessment associated with it. So as we reviewed earlier in the year, assessments are required prior to landmarking. However, there is this language in the code saying that with the finding of good cause, the HPC can grant an exception. And so just to talk about that briefly, good cause, it's all, the whole thing is in your staff report. So it's not, there's no greater detail or criteria, right? So when we as staff were trying to think through like what could good cause mean, we thought about, is it possible to review this with the documentation that we have and sort of be able to tell if it's changed over time and how, and whether it has different types of significance. So we looked at available documentation. We looked at, is there a good faith progress being made on the assessment by the applicant? And so in general, we're finding that there is available or adequate documentation and that there is good faith progress. Another thing we looked at too is, of course, that this does have really strong social history. And there may be a way to think about this, that this is a house that probably the HPC would be interested in regardless or almost regardless of whatever the assessment might find. And really basing that off the fact that in September, the HPC placed that 180-day stay on the property, largely due to its social significance, in addition, of course, to the fact that it's appears to be in pretty good shape. So with all of that in mind, really all that means is there's an extra clause in the resolution saying that with the landmark, you're also finding an exception to allow landmarking prior to the assessment being completed. So staff recommends granting that exception. And like I said, the resolution, if you approve the resolution tonight, if that's your choice, then that'll all be captured in one go. So in summary, staff recommends approval of Resolution 7, Series 2022, which will recommend to Council approval of 1209 Main as a historic landmark, and recommends that it be named for the Kalachi family. And then also, as I noted before, it hasn't gone through probable cause, but the criteria are the same as landmarking. And so approval of this resolution would also make the property eligible for the cost of an HSA. That maximum amount is $4,000 for residential property. So I'm ready for any questions, but that's the end of the presentation.
Thank you.
Great. Does anyone have any questions? And just to make sure, I should have asked this earlier, was Keith able to see it all? We shared it with him, I would imagine.
Well, I did not share this ahead of time, so
Is
But
he
he-
able to watch,
I think he should be, but we can
Okay.
pause and make sure.
I just want to make sure, especially,
Yeah. And he did have the resolution ahead of
right,
time.
right.
No, I'm good. I remember this property.
Okay. Sorry we didn't check on that sooner.
That's fine.
Okay, if you want to see anything, just let us know and we can,
I will do that.
okay. Thanks.
Good point. Should be sharing my screen from here probably.
And it was all in the staff report, so we're good. And it was previous meetings, so I just wanted to, any questions specifically for staff?
The bottom statement there that the approval of this resolution would make the property eligible for the cost of an HSA. Is that stated here?
So I think it's not in the resolution, and I think the way that we were thinking about it was probable causes don't have resolutions, so there's no resolution associated with an assessment, but this is the same process by the criteria standards, so
Well,
we'll
since
just,
we are granting money for a couple of different things, I wondered if we shouldn't just pause and maybe decide that there is probable cause for doing the HSA. It's consistent with our normal process that we have probable cause before we do an HSA and spend the money on that. And I don't think it costs us anything other than a minute or two.
yeah.
What do you think of that?
If I could briefly, so we talked about this, I don't mean to interrupt, but just, so if the criteria, I think the way we were thinking about it is, the criteria is the same, and so we've basically gone through a probable cause process wrapped up into this, but to create a separate, and also just to note that a finding of probable cause isn't required prior to landmarking. So I think so to add a probable cause tonight, I don't think that would be possible because it hasn't been agended, but so I don't know if that answers your question, but to vote on them separately might not be possible, but to vote on it collectively.
Well, it seemed like we really had two items that didn't quite have precedent. One was to do the landmarking without the HSA, and which we've covered by the alteration of the resolution. The other was to do an HSA without the step of having done probable cause. And it just seemed like it'd be a simple thing to do. It isn't that I'm disagreeing with it. It just seems like it would, if somebody outside is looking at the way we handled this, have we gone through the normal steps that we normally would in spending that money? I don't know.
Yeah, and I think too, historically, when we would landmark, the HSA is part of the funding for the grant, regardless of whether they had a probable cause or not. So I think the HSA is for any property that we think would be could or is eligible. So I think if we find that this meets our criteria for landmarking, then it would automatically meet our criteria for probable cause. So and I think too, and this is again historically, is that we've done landmarking with HSA after longer than we have this way we've been doing it in the last
Yeah.
few years. So I'm comfortable with it, but I
Yeah,
understand.
but we
it's
did
not with
define
the-
it in those last few years that the HSA is part of the landmarking. And it's a notably, you can't have an exception, which we were going to do. I just thought it'd be a simple matter
Yeah.
to
But I think it is.
justify the HSA.
I think it is, we didn't note it as far as something we'd be doing. So legally, I don't know that we could split them and actually vote on them, is what I think staff is saying also.
Couldn't we just pretty much introduce any motion among ourselves and vote on that?
So just to clarify, if a specific item is not on the agenda, we can't add new items because they haven't met a public notice requirement. But I think what you could do is if you want to add additional clarifying language within this resolution that speaks to the fact that, Amelia has added that, right, that we have this exception criteria. But I think if there is some more targeted language, you could, approve with a condition to amend the resolution to say such and such, just to clarify if you're concerned about clarification.
And I think we could, even in our voting, just even saying like, this definitely meets our requirements of probable cause, like had we gone that way. And it also
Okay.
meets our landmarking.
Yeah, maybe just alter
So-
this new, whereas, this new statement to say that we have good cause for doing for funding, for having done the historic structure assessment. I mean, that would satisfy me.
Say it one more time, just
Well-
to add.
We added a new clause in this resolution
Right.
to say that we would have an exception for having done the HSA in the course of landmarking the property. We could extend it to say that we also have, we see good cause for performing the historic structure assessment. I mean, maybe it's implied, but it's not stated, I guess.
Yeah,
I just want to check with Lisa quickly because probable causes don't usually have resolutions. So that would be a new thing, which might be possible. I just want to make sure that we're going about it the right.
I think adding a clarifying statement that through this approval, the property is eligible to receive funds related to an HSA is reasonable because there's not a specific agenda item related to an HSA that we could track. So I think it's fine to add maybe something to the effect of, and through the approval of this resolution, this property is eligible for an HSA fund. And
That would
something,
satisfy me.
we can wordsmith it if you want and,
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
you can review it prior to.
The thing is, there are
signing.
people who follow our minutes, and they're cautious about expenditures sometimes, and
I don't see any harm in adding clarifying language to the resolution.
thanks.
any other questions for staff? Okay, We'll let you work on your wordsmithing.
And, you know, we can take your direction and we could bring you back a resolution at the next meeting or something to that effect if we don't want to actually try and wordsmith it tonight, or we can just, you know.
I was teasing,
But I think
but
we've
yeah.
got the direction that we need as far as your intent.
Right. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Any comments from the public? And if you'll just state your name and address for us. Is your microphone on? I'm sorry. Okay, just, well, it's recording. We have to have it recorded. Sorry about that.
I'm Jean Morgan, 1131 Spruce Street over in Minersfield neighborhood. And I would just like to thank the owner of this house for landmarking rather than demolition. And I really appreciate that that will still be a beautiful home on our main street. And when the time comes, if there's interest in building to the property to the north of that house, that it also conform to the architecture of the neighborhood and of Main Street and keep it Old Town looking. But I'm very, very, very thankful that that building is still going to be there, and I wanted to publicly thank the owner for that change. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here to say that.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate your presence here.
Any other comments?
Do I have to? Okay. I just want to echo Jean's.
And you also, I'm sorry, if you'll state your name and
Oh,
address.
sorry, yeah.
Sorry about that.
Steve Selden, 1225 Main Street. Also, just want to echo Jean's sentiments about the owner preserving the property and its, at least its current state or close to what it's going to be. Really, really genuinely heartfelt about that. And thanks. That's about it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for taking the time to express that. All right. And there's no comments online? Okay. All right, we'll bring it back for commission discussion.
It's nice to have this opportunity to vote on landmarking this property tonight because we have seen this property before, and as has been referenced, we've kind of been through the other options that were explored. You know, I think all of us can see really clearly that it meets all the criteria for landmarking, and especially given its prominent location, it's really going to be an asset to our community. So I'm happy to approve landmarking.
I would echo the citizens' comments too, that I really appreciate that this property can be landmarked. I think we're very fortunate that we got to this place, and I appreciate everybody who got involved in making that happen. It's a win for us, for the city.
So just to go through the criteria, this house is definitely 50 years or older. Strong social significance. And I want to say we didn't realize it was a Kolachi house before. Isn't that right?
Didn't.
I mean,
Right, some more history research was done, right, when this kind of process was unfolding, and we learned more history
Right.
about it. Mm-hmm. Yep.
so that's a huge deal that we found a very prominent, and it's on Main Street, so it's in the context of of Main Street, and then it has strong architectural integrity as far as not being changed. So it definitely meets our requirements. And yeah, so I think as far as I'm concerned, like it definitely meets what we need. So
It does, and I think is this the first time we've heard that it might be named or will be named the Kolachi House? So it's exciting.
yeah.
One question I've had a number of times is how we define bootlegging as part of Louisville's business. It kind of wouldn't have been on the record, except that it's on the public record because of the arrests involved in the history that came out here. But we again and again talk about bootlegging, and yeah, maybe it was just a well-known underground vocation at that time.
I think there's plenty of
It's
oral
interesting, though.
history.
Yeah.
And I think too, as far as talking about the landmarking, kind of our out of order landmarking and awarding the $4,000 for the HSA before finding probable cause. I think this is a strong, I think that can, I don't think there's any reason that this house would not, what am I trying to say? Like, I don't think that we are at risk of having a house that needs more work than, as far as what the HSA is gonna, I don't think the HSA is gonna give more information that would make us not think that this is eligible, is what I'm trying to say. So I feel comfortable awarding landmarking status and then giving the HSA second. So
I
I'm
agree with
comfortable
that. And I was just trying to make sure we had a procedure that
Yep,
looked right to
that's great.
outside observers.
Absolutely. Keith, did you have anything, any comments on this? Just jump in if you want to say anything.
He's muted.
Yeah, there he goes.
Oh. No, he's not.
All right.
Maybe he's having technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
now
we
we
can hear
can.
you now. Yep.
Yeah, sorry, I borrowed somebody's PC and I'm an Apple guy, so
Yeah.
it's more operator error than anything. So no, I think this is a great candidate for landmarking, and I personally like the bootlegging status that's associated with it. I think we should do it.
All right.
Bootlegging or landmarking?
Oh,
Oh,
This is in the record, Gary.
okay.
yeah, it's in the record, Gary. No comment.
All right. Do we need another discussion or make a motion?
I would move to approve Resolution 7 for landmarking 1209 Main Street, as well as authorizing a historic structure assessment to accompany it.
I would second that.
All right, and we will do a roll call.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
Commissioner Dunlap,
Yes?
Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Chair Haley.
Yes. So yes, this is definitely best unexpected outcome for this property. So I just feel like a huge weight has been lifted off. But again, I think this is a good example of why we have that 180-day stay, is that it's not punitive, it's purely just for kind of these small miracles that can happen where we just get a second chance and have conversation with the property owner. So yeah, this was a good, excellent outcome.
Through the process, it was pointed out that we do have the ability to do things besides just landmarking to help different ways of preserving a property. And we, in a way, should have had a way to know this and put some thought into it before it came before us because it almost got by us, I think. And it was a wonderful outcome. Maybe we should have been more prepared or something.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely a good learning experience. All right, so we have our 612 Grant Avenue is actually canceled for tonight. Do we need any discussion, or not discussion, but
No, happy for questions, but it was approved by subcommittee.
perfect. And then that ends our public hearings for this evening. So our next item is discussion and direction. Do what? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just rolling right along.
This is just kind of a sidebar.
Sure.
I was talking to Helen Warmberg today, and she told me that some of her kin lived in that house too. And if you'd like more information on that, I can kind of quiz her again and bring it over to the staff.
Okay.
And then talking about the bootlegging, you know, Boulder was dry for like 60 years. So a lot of Boulderites would come to Louisville to drink, and you know, they called us Liquorville.
Uh-huh.
Did you know that?
No.
I think they just came for the Italian food.
Oh, that was it. All right.
Well,
Thank
Yeah,
thank you
that's
for
good
sharing
information.
that.
And
And
that might be something too with the library, because any information that Bridget has, she could just attach to this house too. If you have, if you get more information from
From
Warburg.
Helen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to see Helen tomorrow, and I'll get the proper names and
That might be great.
make sure it's the correct address.
Yeah.
I think that would be
That'd be
great
really
information to
interesting.
have.
All right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you again to the
Yeah.
owners.
Yeah,
Right.
thank you. We'll make sure that
Yeah.
they listen and hear your comments specifically. So thank you very much for coming out. That really means a lot.
Yeah, both of you. Thank you.
Yep, so so we're gonna do our 2023 HPC work plan.
Yes, and I'm going to try to play with some tech here for a moment.
Good night.
Okay, great. So I just want to make sure, actually, before I start, that Keith, can you see my PowerPoint now?
Yeah, I can see it.
You can see it now. Okay, great. Awesome. Okay, so yes, next item is discussion direction on the 2023 HPC work plan. And before I jump into this, I just want to emphasize that, like any discussion and direction, I've come forward with some ideas about how to frame this, but everything is up for discussion. If there's any direction that you'd like to give staff to change literally anything about this process, please feel free and feel open and just give me direction and I'll do it. So with that being said, I'm proposing that we discuss the work plan in 2 phases, so one tonight and then one in January/February, first 2 months of next year. And tonight would be, you know, that first pass at getting all of the ideas on the table that we can, and then also just discussing formatting. I think it's fine if we don't land on a format tonight, but I'd just at least love to get some initial feedback on what document this could, you know, what the document that this would live in would actually look like. So then in January, we could talk about prioritization among all of the different things that we'd like to get done, potentially discuss subcommittees. I'm sure that we'll have new people, so we might not want to overwhelm them on down, you know, meeting one, but still we could talk about that. And then also, again, to those new people, making sure that we do get that new input on the work plan. So those are the 2 parts. And then with that, nested in there, I've got 2 goals for tonight that I'm proposing. So first is to discuss the list of issues and projects overall. And then second, to discuss, you know, to review and basically give staff me direction on the format, right? So I'm hoping that this can be a little fun, the way that we do this brainstorming. I gave it to you in this kind of funky format just to emphasize that this is not a list of proposals, it's just a bunch of ideas. And I want to make sure that, you know, when we do get to the work plan next year, that we're not halfway through the year thinking, oh my gosh, we missed something really important because we didn't take the time to just brainstorm really wildly, right? So with that in mind, I'm going to hopefully soon turn it over to you all and start making little sticky notes. And if this is too bright, we can turn down the lights to kind of see that a little bit better. But before I turn it over to just general, what would you like me to record, I want to ask if you'd like me to read through some of these or if you're ready to kind of jump right in. And
Maybe
while
we
you
can
I'm gonna
have
go.
a few minutes to review them.
I didn't. She did. Yours is the same as hers. Mine's small.
I'm missing the column that she has on the right.
Maybe move that thing around. There you go. There. Yeah. Mine doesn't move at all.
Is there any significance to the colors?
There's not really. I will eventually color code them into groups, but no.
Would it be best to ask if there are any we don't understand to
Totally happy for that. Yes, please.
start? The 2024 Preservation Master Plan preparations, what is that?
Yeah. So that's a recommendation, and I'm sure you'll recognize that some of these are things that I've heard you all talk about, and that we've all talked about together, and some of them are purely staff thinking, oh, this is something that, is on our radar. So that is one of the staff on the radar pieces. Our Preservation Master Plan is at least 10 years old, or somewhere around 10 years old, I think. And so we're, kind of thinking it's getting time to ramp up for a renewal of it. However, maybe next year is a little ambitious, and maybe I kind of was thinking we could put something on there that says, let's start to think about what the format might like to see, or how we'd like to structure community engagement in 2024. Questions like that, we could kind of have maybe a couple of discussion direction items in 2023 that relate to getting us ready to just hit the ground running in 2024. So if that were something, if you all are really excited about the Preservation Master Plan and getting prepared for that, then, you could say, hey, I'm interested in that. Let's get going. And then I would be happy to bring you, a couple small but doable things in 2023 that would help us really get going in 2024.
That's a big description, isn't it, of what we intend for preservation? Isn't that what it is? Just, it's a document?
Yes, exactly. It's got goals, it's got visions, all sorts of pieces, yep. Including a lot of things, and we would honestly start by reviewing that document too, becoming familiar with it and celebrating all the things that other planners have and other commissioners have done.
Yeah, I recall it is a little dated.
Oh, this is Keith. I have a question on the Old Town overlay. Why is that on there? Is it changing, or you just change the format, or what?
Yeah, so the Old Town overlay is sort of been in the works for a while, obviously. And so part of, let's see, in late last year, right, I think is kind of when HPC saw it last. And it's an overhaul, basically, or an update, sort of, somewhere between update and overhaul of the Old Town overlay. And the reason I put it on here is just so that we're aware that will come up and that staff's working on it, and that at some point the commission will see it again. And the very kind of broad strokes of what that will look like is, I think we are going to need to bring it to council and kind of give them some more information, basically, because that's what they asked staff to do last time. So once we're through with that piece, I think the consultants and staff will work together to actually draft the code, and at that point, it'll come back to HPC. So it will be on your radar, hopefully in the next half a year, but
That's that Old Town rezoning effort?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, maybe I should step back. Yeah, the Old Town overlay is what governs, the Old Town part of downtown with the zoning.
Okay.
So the
zoning.
setbacks, yeah, I'm so sorry. That was like the basic part of your question.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Exactly.
I remember that consultant that came out and we walked around with him.
Yes, exactly, Keith.
I remember. Can't think of his name.
Corkit.
Yeah, that's a strange name.
So you say they're working again?
Yep.
They're back on the project. 'Cause actually, some of these items, we could have a priority list, but really some of them we have to do when they come around, like the Meet the CLG Commissioner training. Those are probably not ones we can prioritize down ourselves. They're things we need to do.
Yeah, and I think in January, that would be one of the pieces, and I'm happy to pre-format a little bit and say these are the things we actually like really need to do. Happy to do that so that we can make that really visible. So any other questions for clarification?
What's the grant tracking process improvements? Just keeping track of the numbers, or?
Yeah, so that's also another staff on the radar piece, but I would love to have some, commissioner involvement ideally. I know that, especially since a number of you actually have worked with the assessments or not the assessments, I'm sorry, with the grants. And so I think I would love to do sort of an administrative process update, not a policy update, wouldn't need to come before anybody, but I'd love to work with one or two commissioners to kind of make the grant tracking as smooth as possible. And not to like point you out, Keith, but you've had some really good insights into how I think that could be improved a little bit. So I think that's where I kind of thought, oh yeah, this could be an easier process.
Okay, thank you.
Does that mean we spent 4,000 here, 5,000 there, 20,000 there, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so there are kind of two pieces. One that I think is sort of humming along pretty well. Is the tracking of the amount spent overall from the fund. But what I'm thinking of in this particular instance is individual homeowners and property owners and business owners being able to track their own funds, because oftentimes, as you'll know, they come in piecemeal. Oh, we did the gutter work and then we did the next work, and we don't really have a great system for that. And I think it's sort of a customer service piece that I'd personally really love to share with you all and get, like I said, get some feedback on how to improve that.
Yeah, that would be a worthwhile thing. I think Rob expressed at a prior meeting too that he was getting some questions about the size of our preservation fund and how it's used. And the more justification we have of how we're using it is probably a good thing.
Yeah. And there's another, just to relate it back, one of the pieces I think that he's mentioned before and that we've all kind of talked about is on here as well, the property outreach. So actually, and I know this has come up in a number of meetings previously, is like targeted outreach to, however it's framed, but the top 3, the top 5, the whatever, the things that are out there, the kolache houses, right? That are out there that, we'd actually like to do some targeted proactive outreach. I think that's another relationship with that big, $3 million number, is making sure that we're finding the properties that we'd really like to make sure to try to landmark at least, or try to, request and kind of communicate the program.
That sort of goes hand in hand with the Paleo West surveys too, that it sort of pushes, brings out some properties that are special and are special types within the preservation, and it may help us. Well, it's like picking candidates for a coloring book. It lets us look at properties that we do want to preserve. Although I guess all the ones in the coloring book are already preserved. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Do we have, are we close in having a Paleo West presentation? I feel like that might be a good thing to have towards the beginning of the year as far as prioritizing goes, if that's at all.
Yeah, so here's where that stands. I think we're still reviewing edits,
Okay.
but definitely on the radar, known that that's out there to be done. And so the next piece, and probably this is a good time for me to check in with all the different moving parts, but the next piece would be to get back in touch with Paleo West, because it has been a while, and say, hey, here, and ideally that would happen with the updates, right, with the edits to the survey. So yeah, I mean, I think putting that, and we can talk about this in January, but maybe I can propose, for you all to play with, putting that in the first half of the year, and then putting the property outreach starting in the second half or something, so that we can kind of dovetail some of these priorities as well. Happy to play with that.
Yeah, I just think obviously it's been lingering for a while, understandably, but with potential new commissioners coming on and just the start of the year, I think that could just be a really good just way to kind of prioritize properties, see what's, I don't know, just a good educational, but also kind of give us more. My brain is like not working. Kind of cohesion on like where we're going, what we want, that kind of thing. So, if at all possible, I think the first part of the year would probably be really good.
No, I think you're
So-
right, that it's been out there a while, but looking at that and the preservation master plan, some of those are almost the training materials for new commissioners.
Totally,
And
exactly.
it never was really in place before. The only thing that was looked at was the lawyer or the legal background thing. I don't know if you feel the same way, Chrissy, but being a new member, but it's sort of an immersion. I mean, it's fun to learn all this stuff. but-
Right. And it's so
maybe-
much, there's so much information there, so it's hard not to be able to access it. Like, we just want to, like, hear it all and see it all and be able to use it finally. So, anyway, but that's a lot of work, too. So, we totally recognize that. But just, yeah, I think that could be very helpful. And I think the master plan, I think it is definitely in our best interest to start looking at going that direction for next year. I think it's not gonna hurt us if we strive for that in 2024. And if for some reason we end up saying that's not gonna actually happen in 2024, all that work is still gonna be in our favor. So I think like a lot of our outreach and educational pieces that we have up there, the Paleo West, the Old Town Overlay, the grant tracking, like all of that is gathering information of like where do we want our program to go and like how's it working now. And so I think definitely if we keep that in our minds with everything we do, that we're working towards our master plan. I just think that's probably definitely in our favor. So obviously not getting so caught up in it that we, I don't know, get overwhelmed or whatever, but I think just having that framework is good, so,
She just added a new action item.
yep.
Yeah, this is a super fun software where you can just
I
put
know.
different colored sticky notes
I know.
up. What more could you want?
It's like every
on a Monday
planner's
night?
dream.
Seriously. Yes. Anything that's missed here, and let me also say that please, between now and January, and I know your time is, we've already all slim with the holidays and everything, but throw your ideas in
Out
email.
there. That's
Happy for
good.
that, yep.
And the church bell, is that from First Baptist? Is that? What's the church bell?
Yeah, exactly. So we've got two of these pieces so the Blue Parrot sign and the church bell are both in storage.
Okay.
And just bringing those back up and saying, these are in storage. Obviously, they can remain there, but if that's a priority, something that people are interested in revisiting, because it's been a while. The church bell, I'm not sure how far down the line that got, but it's certainly been a while since the Blue
Yeah.
Parrot locations were considered and evaluated, so.
That's something that the Historic Museum is also thinking about, and what to do with those?
Yeah, so I think that if that's part of it, we would definitely, talk to the museum about their workload and their process, because I think they've been heavily involved in at least the Blue Parrot conversation and location stuff, so.
Yeah, we should definitely probably visit that this year.
Are we, I'm looking at the one in the top right corner, the blue sticky note. So the commissioner training requirement, are we due for that?
Yeah, so I can actually, let me just bounce over here quickly just to kind of, we'll come back to it. But so the CLG review that we got, so I think it's every 3 years or every 4 years, but we just were up when Lindsay came and visited us a couple months ago to kind of audit the program. She looked at the past 4 years, and we met most of the requirements really well, very exciting, we totally rock. A couple things we did not meet, which we already knew we weren't gonna meet, right? One of those being the SHPO approved training. So I'm not sure, probably since 2020 would be my guess. It's been a lot harder to meet that anyway. But at least for the last year, if not the last 2 years, we haven't had at least one commissioner go to a SHPO-approved training. Exciting thing is, Saving Places is actually one of those. So I think we will hit that. But as a lifelong list maker who likes to write things on and then cross them off immediately, I'd love to have that on here to be like, look, we met it this year.
So it's within, like, as far as them coming, we're still within that year. Like,
Well,
what's there, or it doesn't matter? We
It
just have
doesn't,
to be
I
able
think
to
it's sort of
show.
just to like
just
show
say
that you're
good
getting back
now.
on
Okay.
the wagon.
That's good.
Yeah.
We'll get it checked off for you.
Okay, well, good.
We'll go ahead and put a star on that one too. But yeah, that'll be.
Along with the item you had for the grant tracking, I don't know if we've already talked a bit about this or if we think we have it, but we've talked about tracking any of the properties that were brought up to us. If people brought them up for probable cause, what happened, and which we really, we owe an annual report to the city commission about, or city council, about what we've done for the year. And it seems like that would be a reasonable thing to know. Obviously, the properties we've landmarked, but which ones have been demolished and which ones have been brought forward for probable cause and nothing really happened. We've talked about that before, but I don't know if it's as formalized as the list you're putting together now. So maybe that would be a.
I think this is a bucket to throw everything into. So I'm happy to put those on. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be similar to the grant tracking.
Yeah.
I think. I know we've taken some stabs at doing that, but we haven't formalized it enough or proceduralized it enough to have that.
Well, and I will say too, I mean, this maybe gets to a larger piece that I've definitely heard in other meetings. The staff has those records, right? When we do track, I mean, if somebody's out there demolishing something we don't know about, then that's like a different story. But the reviews and the alterations and the probable causes we do track. But I think there's a couple and tell me if I'm misunderstanding, Gary, but I think there are a couple pieces. One is, I think you're right, we probably don't have a great sense of why people get to probable cause and then not landmarking, or why it takes them so long. So that's sort of like a data point to investigate. And then also, I think I've heard just a desire to know, like, to actually have access to that tracking, whether it be public or whether it be, with the commission. So I'm happy to kind of pursue those pieces as well. So we have the information, we just maybe don't have it as available as it should be.
I think I've had that conversation with you before, that while the city has that information, the commission doesn't.
Yep.
And we have the responsibility for historic preservation, and I don't mean that to be a criticism, but it's just a bit of a missing link.
So maybe make tracking docs in general more accessible, something like that, so we can kind of pursue that.
Yeah, and there's an aspect that maybe should be public, but it's hard to tell. It's maybe not something you want up on the website.
Yeah, definitely something we should explore, though, to make sure you have all the information that you need.
Yeah, I think it covers a very good amount of things that will keep us busy for the year. So,
Yes.
yeah. I think, I
Thought
can't
to
think of.
keep us busy through March, right?
And if we do the master plan for 2 years, it'll be good. So, yeah, I think, I can't think of anything there's specific things that fall under all those things, but I can't think of a broader category that we haven't addressed up there. So,
Great. Okay.
sense of.
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, add so many things. It's job security for me, and lots of projects for me to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so like I said, please continue to send me ideas if you have them as they occur to you, and then I will try to kind of bring these together into a prioritization, wrangling for next time. So with that in mind, I do just want to, and if we need to do this over email, that's also fine. But if possible, if you did have a chance to look at the work plan itself, like the document, I'd love to get any initial feedback, especially if it's, hey, I really want it to be something else, or that's fine, go ahead and test it out. There's a couple things that I'll just kind of highlight that this assumes. One is that, subcommittees would be grouped sort of in general umbrellas, and they'd be responsible for some of these projects. And I think the other piece is that it's laid out in an actual year quarterly format. And I think because to me, at the end of the day, it's about time and people's energy, right? It's about people and time. So that's what I'm trying to sort of show with this. So I'm happy to continue running with this. I'm happy for, if anybody else wants to take a stab at it, or if you liked what you saw from 2018, 2019, and you want me to reuse the previous format, I'm happy for that as well. But I just wanted you to see something and hear if there was anything immediately you'd like me to change.
I really like it set up like this. I think it gives us clear, it's just easier to work on goals when you have like a timeline and kind of see where you're going, and instead of being overwhelmed with everything. So I think the timeline is really nice. And just helps it makes sense too, as far as like what things we need to do first, so that we can do things later. Because there's some things that we can't do until some things are done first. So just prioritizing them like this and visually being able to see all that, I think is really helpful.
I like this layout too. I really like how the subcommittees and projects are laid out really clearly, so you can see what they are and what falls, you got the broad title and what falls underneath them. And then I also agree that I like how you've broke them into the quarters. So just really quickly, looking at the timing and what we have to accomplish, and then how much time we have, and how long, when those things need to be started and carried through to is really helpful.
Well, you can tell me all the things you don't like over email anonymously. But no, that's great. I really appreciate that. I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, I think that time especially is it's helpful, because I'm always the person who signs up for like 15 things at the same time,
Right.
and then doesn't recognize that they're all gonna, happen in July.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, you have access to these between now and January, and even after that, if you'd like updates or anything. And I'm also happy, I was thinking about this the other day, like we could schedule something in June to just revisit, like how is this working for us, so that we don't find ourselves in 2024 being like, oh, we forgot about that document. So I'm happy to kind of build that into the process as well.
And even quarterly, like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's, if we're dividing it into quarters, it probably isn't a bad idea to check in on the quarters. Just to make sure that if something needs to get pushed over or revisited or whatever.
Yeah.
Do you like it? What's your opinion?
The format? Yeah, I didn't have too much chance to drill down on detail, but the general idea
You like the
makes sense
timeline
to
like
me.
that?
Yeah.
Thank you for putting this together, Amelia.
Yeah.
Because we did look at, or I've at least seen some of the other work plans, and they all had a lot of things that worked. So this looks like a good melding, and I think this could work really well. So thank you.
And I think too, you and we kind of talked about it, but like making sure that some of those master plan things that we can knock off this year, if we can add it into our year, that would just make sense. If there's some things that are like, oh, that's an quote unquote easy or doable thing we could do this year, just so that, because I feel like we also haven't gone back to that master plan list a ton over the last couple years, just with everything else. And so before we rewrite it and add all those things back onto it because we didn't do it, like just anything we can. So.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. I'm excited. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is, like I said, I will maybe I'll do some color coding and sort of group them like into outreach or those kinds of very big umbrellas, and then also take some of the priorities that I heard here and then try to play with them on the actual calendar so that, you know, again, we can kind of move things around in January and be really serious about like when things can happen and start thinking about, you know, what we'd all like to kind of work on. Okay, so if that's okay, I'm gonna move on to other things. Awesome. So items from staff, just a few subcommittee updates. 612 grant, we already talked about, that was an addition, was approved by subcommittee. And then the demolition reviews, so 516 Lincoln had an addition that was approved by subcommittee, and then 501 Spruce had some garage work, also approved by subcommittee. We've already talked about CLG review letter. One other thing to note too is, of course, as we know, not meeting the number. So CLG minimum is 5, but again, they're sort of just noting that this is, you know, work on these pieces, which we have and we are. And also, I think it's tomorrow night that the council is going to actually be reviewing and appointing people. So get, you know, log in, get ready. And then the other thing that's happening tomorrow night, in an effort to just try every once in a while to kind of say, hey, this is where different projects that you've already reviewed are going. 600 Lincoln and 612 Jefferson are both go to council tomorrow night. Okay. And then my last thing is just that the upcoming schedule has this next meeting on MLK Junior Day. So I don't know that people know already if they're not available. I can follow up over email, but I just wanted to note that I think we can meet in, I mean, City Hall will be closed, but we can have the meeting, you know, here if it works for everybody.
We should probably wait and ask, well, it's in January.
The new commissioners.
I know.
As well, should probably.
I'm like,
So.
I just wonder if we should just go ahead and, we've always moved it in the past. Yeah,
Okay.
so I would say, especially because we can't have a meeting with them to say, can you make it to the first meeting? And a lot of families take that weekend off for just the Monday. What do you think?
You already have your ski pass, right?
Well, I'm just,
No,
yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's not a
No,
bad idea,
it makes sense.
considering
Yeah.
if it was the 4 of us, we could decide that right now,
Right.
but not knowing with them, it would be a pretty clunky way to start
Right.
their new term. So
Yep.
picking a non-holiday weekend or non-holiday Monday would probably be better.
Great.
How much notice do you have to post the date of that next meeting? A week, 2 weeks, or?
It really should be at least 3 weeks so that we can notice any public hearing items because they need
Oh.
15 days. I mean, that would still be pretty tight and make me pretty anxious, but 3 weeks could work. But I think what we could do then is I can look into other dates that, you know, this room is available and get feedback from the 4 of you just to make sure at the base we have quorum. But I'll look into that and then also, I mean, we might have the contact information for the new folks sooner than later. And so if we do, I'll try to get on that and make sure we can have as many people in January as possible.
January does have 5 Mondays, so the 23rd would be, you know, pretty reasonable. to
One
just
of
do
them
that.
is council's in here on one night, so I have to do a little bit of playing around. But but yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We met in that other room down there. It was lovely.
Oh yes. That's super fair. We could just go in the spruce room.
We'll wait to hear, I guess, on that, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think worst case, I'm sure, yeah.
Because at that, once we're bringing 3 new members on, and so how many then would be required to be quorum to be here?
I think it's a majority of the total, right?
So before.
Yeah, so before.
Right, so, I don't know, maybe, we just, even if we had a quorum, I just hate for new members to miss like a first meeting.
Yep.
So it's less
Yep.
about that, it's more about just, you know, starting on the right foot,
Yeah.
if possible.
Yeah. And on the flip side, if they're like, oh, I can do the 3rd,
Right,
then we're like, oh, except we changed your very first one.
right, so
I
maybe we
don't
reach
know.
out to them and see.
Yep, that seems fair. I can handle that. I will wait until we get a full group, our full commission that I hope that we shall have.
And we will all respond
And
very
they
fast.
all respond very quickly, and the holidays will get in no one's way.
Right.
Yes, yes.
No, in the past, I guess the building wasn't open, so we just couldn't even do it. So we can do it now because they'll open it for us? Or,
I don't know, I thought we had done it in the past on MLK Day, but maybe I'm misremembering.
Because we rescheduled every
Yeah.
single
We-
federal holiday.
Yeah, typically this does come up every year, and yeah, you're
Yeah.
right, we don't hold meetings on MLK Day, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, so we will reschedule, and, yeah, the appointee should happen tomorrow, so hopefully, you know,
Okay.
that there's time here in the next.
But we could still meet if we wanted to. Or no?
I don't believe we
Okay.
should meet
Okay,
on a
so
federal holiday.
That's easy then. You
Yeah.
can't. Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
Good to, I did not know that, so great. Okay,
Because
so
we
we'll move
started-
it, and
yeah.
we'll talk to the
Okay.
full group about it.
Because we
Okay.
started doing, like last year was the first that we just worked through all the holidays because we were all virtual. And so we didn't have like a closed building, so we just did them anyway. But every year we've always rescheduled.
I could be wrong, I think it's probably a should, not a can't, but,
Yeah.
you
Fair
know, a
enough.
shouldn't, not a can't, but yeah, I think it has been practiced to move that first meeting.
Yeah, but it's easy just to, not easy to reschedule, but at least we have like a, should we not? Like we just know we need to. Anyway.
Yeah.
You can let us know.
Happy to do that, happy to do that, no worries.
Okay, thank you.
Cool, okay.
Because
That's
I
it.
think February we
February,
have the same
I think we
thing.
might,
'Cause it's always January, February, our first meetings, we always have to reschedule. Because it's
Right.
the 20th is President's Day.
President's Day, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so just get your calendars ready for January and February.
Okay.
Is what I'm hearing. And I will let you know.
Okay, that's great.
fun.
All right. Any other upcoming schedule information? That was it.
You mentioned the new commissioners training. Maybe we should all participate in that. I don't, like I said, I don't think I had any training when I started, other than the legal issues,
Yeah.
requirement.
And we talked about that too, of just doing a kind of a full commission refresh.
Yeah.
And so we can definitely do that. I think staff was concerned of time for commissioners, just making another meeting.
I see.
So, but the new people would be doing it anyway. So as long as it's,
We just can't have more than two of them there at the same time, and then it becomes a public meeting. So we tend to do these new commissioner trainings 2 at a time, recognizing that we'll have to schedule, you know, one as a one-off. You know, and a lot of it is really like, you're gonna receive your packet via this. And so some of them are things that really aren't really helpful, but I recognize that you might be asking for some additional training. So we can talk about that. But we are limited for number of people in the room at any given time.
right. Well, and we had talked as far as like having like a kind of publicly noted training kind
Yeah.
of thing, but
Yeah, and I think we can just
figure
double
it
check offline about that process, yeah.
because we talked about that exactly. We've had new people, because I think Keith is probably similar as far as not having
Yeah.
like a formal, anyway.
I couldn't even navigate the website very well when I started, and it really is kind of the key. I didn't realize that there wasn't much under Historic Preservation Commission. It was mostly under the Planning Department. And because they don't link together very well a lot of times. So all of these surveys and preservation plans and things like that, they're not obvious for a while.
Yeah, and it's a lot of
Or
information.
the ordinances, you know.
You know, we generally do put kind of a new commissioner packet together, and so that would be really easy just to share with you via email, so at least you have been a refresh on kind of all the resources that we share with them.
And we could probably review it too and see what
Absolutely.
That'd be helpful.
how clear it is.
Yeah, I think that's it for items from staff.
All right, any updates from commission members?
I guess we have a subcommittee discussion, Will, about the coloring book. We can do that separately, I guess.
All right, our last item is to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Okay. I'll
Second.
Oh,
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, meeting adjourned.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Keith.
Thanks, Keith. sign this?